Welcome to Democrat Television. My name is Sylvia Woods. I'm the host tonight, and we're going to bring you a program of interest to everyone on what's happening with the suffrage movement. And we look forward to the 100th birthday a year from this August in 100 years, and we're going to talk about some things that are coming up and how important it is that we learn about suffrage. Our guest tonight is Wanda Sobieski. She's kind of like our mother of the suffrage movement in the current time frame. She's a local attorney and has been trying to retire for several years, and the creator of the local suffrage movement. We're calling this program Tennessee's Finest Hour, and by the end of the show we hope you understand why we have chosen this name and this title, and that you're going to hear all about today. So, Wanda, tell us about your friend that you have with us today.
Well, this is a winner of a national doll making contest, and this is Susan B. Anthony. Shows her in her 80s and dressed like she dressed, and it's beautifully done, and I just thought it'd be a nice three-dimensional prop for us.
Yes, we all love dolls, we know that. And so, in my lifetime, I know Susan B. Anthony from the coin.
Right.
But that was only a few years ago. Before that, I didn't even know anything about Susan B. Anthony.
Well, you weren't alone. When I started in the early 90s, I was president of the East Tennessee Lawyers Association for Women. And we had a board meeting and we're trying to decide on a program, and I suggested that we do a celebration for Susan B. Anthony's birthday. And none of the women in the room knew who she was. It was before the coin, and they had no idea. And that's part of what started me thinking we really need to get people educated about the stories.
Well, and that is what I wanted to ask you about. What stimulates you to get involved in the suffrage movement?
Well, originally I worked for the Equal Rights Amendment in the 70s, and it was really hard for me to understand how there could be such fierce opposition to changing the Constitution just to make everybody equal. Not better than, not have better advantages, but just give everybody a level playing field. And it was ferocious. When we were out there working, I learned just how bad it was. And so I mentioned that to one of the co-workers, and she just sort of laughed at me and said, well, they did the same thing for suffrage. And of course, I hadn't learned anything about suffrage in school because we didn't have women's history back then. And so I honestly thought she was exaggerating or lying. And so I went to the library and started researching, and what I found just absolutely blew me away. I could not believe it took 72 years of ceaseless battles, hundreds of campaigns in Congress, and hundreds more in the states, just to get the right to vote. I mean, it's supposed to be a democracy, and half the people couldn't vote. It shouldn't have been that hard, but it was.
And we need to remember our history. If we don't, we repeat the past or whatever it is. But I do think more women vote now than men do, actually. But that doesn't mean that's an okay or a pass.
Right.
Everybody still needs to be out there voting.
Yeah, absolutely, because all of the things that we do today have such ripple effects over time. And if we don't get our best and brightest people paying attention and going to the polls and voting, then we're not going to be the best we can be.
That is true. So two of the most visible examples of your work are the statues in downtown Knoxville.
Yes.
So tell us about the first statue and how difficult it was. And I will say this because I know I was helping you with it. Lobbying for the site, responding to the necessary codes, permission to place them, in addition to raising the money to pay for them. So tell us some stories about that.
Well, in 1995, I got appointed to the statewide suffrage commission to help celebrations of the 75th anniversary. And someone mentioned to me that there was absolutely no statue, not even a bust or a plaque anywhere in the state recognizing the contribution of Tennessee women to the suffrage cause. And I found that hard to believe, so I started looking, and unfortunately, that person was right. And so I had proposed that we get the 3 grand divisions of Tennessee work together, design, commission a statue, and then have it in each of the 3 grand divisions. Well, the other 2 grand divisions didn't get too busy working on it very much. I think the $375,000 price tag was a little daunting.
Oh, yes. And on the screen you can see this is the statue that we're talking about. The first one that's on Market Square Mall, the 3 women that mean so much to all of us.
Yes, yes. So there's 1 woman from each of the grand divisions that was a leader in the state of Tennessee during the battle for suffrage.
That's good. And so tell us about the sculpture.
The sculptor is Alan LaQuire, and he has done both of these statues, the one on Market Square and the Byrne Memorial we'll see in a minute. And he's also done one that was recently unveiled in Nashville. I'm glad to see they're catching up with us there.
Right.
And he's a historical sculptor. He did the Athena that's in the Parthenon in Nashville. Very, very good. And if you look at these, the expressions on their faces are really nice. I just think they're wonderful pieces of work.
And we have volunteers who go and wash them every now and then because,
Yes.
you know, as would be in any downtown location, we have birds and we have dirt and dust. And so we have a group of people who go down and wash them every so often to climb up that ladder and be careful, don't break anything. So it's a real dedicated group of people that you're working with.
It has been.
Yes.
The first memorial, I should say, we kicked it off in '95 and we unveiled it in 2006. So it was 11 years of fundraising before we got to see a final product. So that was a long one.
And so tell us about the bricks that surround.
The bricks were part of the fundraising. People could buy a brick engraved with their name or the name of someone they wanted to honor. And I think it's a really nice feature because when I go to Market Square, I see people reading the bricks and reading the base all the time. And a lot of people bought bricks for their grandchildren, and their grandchildren now come and look at their bricks.
Well, and that is true. I bought for my grandchildren, and now they're grown, but they still want to go back and find their brick.
Right.
So now the second sculpture,
Okay.
Harry Byrne and his mother.
Yes.
And why are these 2 people so important to the movement to win the women's right to vote?
Well, that's a really special place that East Tennessee has in the story, because when Tennessee was chosen for the final battleground before the 1920 presidential election, the state of Tennessee was still pretty split on suffrage. But eventually Governor Roberts did call a special session of the legislature, and eventually when they went through the Senate very easily, it got to the House, got bogged down in a lot of procedural motions to avoid the vote. And then on the 18th of August of 1920, it finally came to the floor for a vote. And the suffragists who were up in the balcony watching all these men down there who were the legislators could tell who was pro and who was anti, because all of the pro-suffragists were pinned with yellow roses, and all of the antis wore red roses. And so they counted up the roses and knew it was a dead tie, and everybody expected suffrage to fail. And then when they did the roll call vote, the 7th person called was Harry Byrne, 24-year-old legislator from Nyota right here in East Tennessee. He stood up with his red rose on and switched his vote, broke the tie, and with that 27 million women were enfranchised.
And the reason we say it's Tennessee's finest hour is because it was down to Tennessee.
Yeah, it was down. And I should point out that there was a riot that broke out in the legislature after his vote. They convened a grand jury to try to charge him with bribery. So he came back to the House chamber to explain his vote, and he pulled a letter out of his suit pocket from his mother, who had asked him to be a good boy and vote for suffrage. So he did. So that's why we want to honor both Feb Byrne, the mother, and Harry Byrne in the Byrne Memorial.
And so where's the letter now?
The letter is now in the McClung Collections, which is right next to the Byrne Memorial in the Customs building there. It is, of course, being archived, but copies of it are available both in the History Center Museum and online at mcclungcollection.org. That's one of the things the Suffrage Coalition did, is raise enough money to get those digitized. His papers
good.
and French's
I heard
papers.
It was a short letter, but then you tell me, no, it's several pages.
It's 7 pages.
It's 7 pages. But what we know is that the mother told him what to do, and he did.
Exactly.
And then what was the story about him climbing out the bathroom window to get?
Oh, no, it wasn't the bathroom window. It was out the window of the legislative chamber, and across a 4-inch ledge back into the lobby area, and then up into the attic of the library to hide during the riot until people calmed down about 2-3 hours later.
I had somebody. I told him we were going to do this show, and he said, "Have her bring the letter." And where's the picture of him climbing out of the bathroom window? So it wasn't the bathroom window,
No.
But I do know that. And then he lost his election the next time. Was that true?
No,
he won.
He won.
Oh,
he
terrific!
Went on to serve in the legislature.
We were smart enough to vote then. We got the right to vote and could vote.
The women got the right to vote and rewarded him, I suspect.
I think that is great. And so, history, tell us about present. What are we doing now to work on building up to the anniversary? And let's talk first about the mayor's challenge that she presented the other day.
Yes, the mayor has authorized $25,000 in seed money to help support groups that want to do suffrage celebrations, things that will be a lasting way to remember suffrage. And so I know, for example, of some people that are doing original musicals that will be applying for those grants. There's a theater that's going to do a documentary on suffrage, so they'll be applying as well. And then there's some money set aside for teachers. The grants will go from $100 to $5,000. And so we're hoping to encourage the creative people in our community to help us preserve the history.
Right.
That's part of our goal. Our goal is both to locate the history, much of which is still hiding in attics and basements of descendants, and then preserve the history as well.
That's good. And then we've got an event coming up.
Yes.
The
yes.
Sampler Coalition. Suffrage Coalition Sampler, let's
There
say
you
it
go.
right.
Well,
on the 18th, which is that anniversary you're talking about.
Right. The critical vote in Tennessee was on August the 18th, and last year the Suffrage Coalition got a resolution unanimously through our state legislature honoring and declaring that as Feb Byrne Day. So this is our first Feb Byrne official dinner, and we're doing a sampler. And by that I mean during the cocktail hour preceding the dinner, we'll have tables set up. We'll have authors who have written new books about suffrage. One of Harry Byrne's descendants will be there with a book that he's recently released. We'll have musicians who've done music that could be used in celebrations next year. We'll have the people doing musicals and documentaries and various and sundry other things. We'll also have suffrage materials, so that if you want to have a sash or a button, they'll be there so you can be well dressed for the suffrage event. There's a silent auction. We'll have suffrage hats and other things to help you be in style for the 2020 year. We will have victory flags. Alice Paul had a flag that she sewed a star on each time a state ratified. It took 36 states to ratify the Constitution to make it law. And so we have a little replica of that, a 3x5. I plan to fly mine from January 1st to December 31st of 2020.
That's good. Now, I want to back up just a minute because in my notes I wanted to point out something about the Old Gray Cemetery.
Okay.
Tell us why that's important in the suffrage movement.
Well, that's where Lizzie Crozier French's grave is, for one
Right.
thing. And Lizzie Crozier French was a very important Knoxville suffragist, but she was much more than a suffragist. She did there's hardly any progressive thing that you can think of she wasn't involved in, from free kindergartens to school lunches to smoke control for the coal burning downtown to rating movies so that kids, you know, when it's safe to take your child to a movie, founding a school, the first teaching school for women, founding the Unitarian Church. I could just go on and on. She was just amazing. And so
And is she the one that has her sister that's buried there too? Is
she
that
has
the whole
two
family?
sisters buried there. One of them founded the Democratic Women's Club, and one of them, Lucy, was a lecturer who traveled all over the country giving scientific lectures. But I like her most because she founded the first legal aid society in Knoxville.
Oh, that's good. So these are things that we need to know. We need to be able to pass on. And
That's right.
It shouldn't be that somebody has to go hunt everywhere all over the country to find this information. It should be available. We should be learning about it. We should be taught about it.
Well, it's now required in 5th grade in Tennessee
that's wonderful.
to know at least about the Harry Burns story. And that's a far cry from where we were when we started this work when nobody knew
and
who
we
he
would
was.
encourage you, just if you want a moment of quiet, go through the Old Gray Cemetery. And it's on one of the paths to the left, right at a corner. There's several of that family are buried there. And it just, you know that somebody right here in Knoxville was so instrumental in making this happen. So that I didn't want to leave that out. And is Lucy the one that's on the statue?
No, Lizzie's on the statue. Lizzie's on the statue.
Crochet French is on the statue with the 3 women. So
that's correct.
You know, you need to know a little bit.
She's the lead woman in the
about
front.
There. Yeah. Okay, and so you've talked to us about the sampler dinner, and so we've got coalitions forming all over the state.
Yes.
Getting ready, and
That's
we
right.
work with the East Tennessee. We're a part of the East Tennessee Coalition.
We're trying to coordinate East Tennessee.
Right.
And then there's a group in Nashville trying to coordinate Middle Tennessee,
Right.
and a group in West Tennessee,
Tennessee.
trying to coordinate there. And then the 3 of us are trying to work together
also work
as well.
together to do some things. We've talked about doing a pass the torch kind of an event, to where we start from different parts of the state, stop at any site that's relevant to the suffrage movement, and then meet in Nashville, so at the middle of the state where the vote was actually taken. That would make that relevant. But we talk about passing the torch, but it's more than that. It's not just carrying a physical torch, because we're not going to walk all that distance, but getting others involved with doing that, and helping us. We're talking about the bicycle people. We're just getting started, so we're eager to have anybody to come do that. And also we look at passing the torch is our responsibility to pass the torch to our young women and our young men, so that they know what has happened. And I think in 1920, it was my mother was born in 1920, so I can relate to that twinning, thinking the year she was born was the year that we actually got the vote. And before my mother was born, no women could vote.
Not for president, that's for sure.
Well, there were some states that allowed women to vote a little bit, but not the national federal law.
The far west territories let women vote.
Right.
So
that was,
as a matter of fact, there's a big controversy in Congress when Wyoming was coming in as a state, because Wyoming let their women vote in all elections, and women weren't allowed to vote in federal elections anywhere else in the United States. And so Congress tried to make them exclude women from federal voting, and they said they would rather not be a territory at all. They would just, be a state at all. They
and
just
you would
walk
think,
and stay a territory.
Western state would all be men, wouldn't you think? But no, they had support.
It's a hard life out there as a pioneer. You better respect everybody, I think.
That is good. So you've got stuff from everybody and everywhere, important historical stuff that families don't want to carry along with them, but they know it's too important to do away with, or at least you keep reminding them it's too important to do away with, and you've gathered it up. So what are you going to do with all this stuff?
Well, we have, for example, Harry Burns' chairs from his legislative office, the guest chairs that he had when this vote was taken. We also have one from his reception area. We have signed and long written, handwritten letters from Susan B. Anthony and Carrie Chapman Catt and Lucretia Mott. We have hundreds of postcards that were the things that they used for most of the propaganda, and most of them became posters. And so my hope is that we will have a women's suffrage museum. Our museum here does a wonderful job. They're fabulous. The East Tennessee History Center, I admire them all, but they don't have enough room to tell our story completely. I mean, they try to address it, but they just don't have enough room. And because people don't know our stories, I think it's more important for us to tell it in more detail. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to get together a realistic proposal by next year to move forward with a museum in Knoxville, Women's Suffrage Museum in Knoxville. And that way,
so
our
you'll have a
daughters
place.
will know.
So you'll have a place that you don't have to worry about what happens to my stuff.
That's right.
Everybody will get to see it, enjoy it, and learn from it like you have.
We can preserve these materials and make them available to everybody, and it's just a wonderful thing to do. And now that we can put it all, the images at least, we can put on the internet, so that scholars all over the world will be able to find out what really happened. And that's important, not just so we don't make the same mistakes over and over again, although that's important too. But it's important, I think, to realize that these weren't perfect people, and that they had their disagreements and arguments, and they'd split up and get back together in the various groups over the 72 years. It was difficult, but they stayed with it. And so if you're working on something really good and people disappoint you, you just need to keep going. You can't stop.
That's true. And I want you all to know that DTV is set up on YouTube, so you can go to Democrat Television on the YouTube channel and see this show again that you can show, and you can use it for programs. Any of your meetings that you have that you want to talk about suffrage and as the topic. You don't have to have Wanda to come because she's so busy you can hardly get her. So, and then you had a daughter that moved, and that makes a difference too. When you retire and your family expects you to spend some time with them.
Well, I think that's reasonable.
And that's why you retire.
That's right.
That's why you retire.
That's right.
Also, you can go to suffragecoalition.org on the website and see lots of pictures, see events, see a place to volunteer. You can fill out a form and to volunteer. Somebody will get back with you and say what we need you to do.
They can donate. There's a donate button, of
yes,
course.
Donate. Never forget to donate. We've got to preserve the 2 statues that we have, and we need to build this museum. So that's going to take money. But you don't tell Wanda no, because Wanda says, what? Oh, yeah. Because that's what they said to you when you said, we're going to put a statue up. It's like, really?
Now we have 2.
And now we have 2.
That's right.
Yes, we have 2, and we have a whole group of people who are working hard to make it happen. In addition to this sampler that we're having on the 18th, we've got some other things planned. We're going to do another suffrage march sometime next summer. We're talking about developing out this Pass the Torch, and then we're working with other groups that the Park Association are having certain events that have suffrage events across the state, and we'll be putting monuments in certain places across the state. So if you want to know more about what all we do, then go to that website, and then if you want to join us, we meet on the 4th Thursday of each month to talk about what we're going to do to help move this along, and we really appreciate that. So and you want to remind me that they go to Facebook as well.
Yes, that's right.
Facebook as well. Like it and look at it.
It's just Suffrage Coalition on Facebook.
Yes. So, and that's great. So,
and it'll also have the details on how to get tickets for the sampler, and
yes,
other events will be posted as they get finalized.
And I want to say thank you, Wanda, for being here to helping us have this show to help educate, entertain, inform, and get people involved in the suffrage movement. That's critical for us to make things happen. So I do want to say thank you. But we have a few more minutes, and if there's anything else that you would like to tell us.
Well, the suffrage history in Tennessee is really rich. And now, of course, people know the Byrne story pretty well now.
Yeah.
I've even seen it in the New York Times and all across the country now. So that one's no longer, in the shadows. But one of my favorite stories is the story of the man who was the second youngest person in the legislature that year. His name was Joe Hanover. He was just a few months older than Harry Byrne. Harry was 24 years old. And Joe was smuggled out of Poland in a sack by his mother just before the First World War. Mm-hmm. When he grew up enough to know that his mother couldn't vote in this country they came to with all of its great freedoms, he told everybody he met that he was going to run for the legislature and change that.
Oh, really? And
Joe Hanover was the person who sponsored the ratification bill in the House in Tennessee. So he lived up to his word and really honored his mother.
That's great. I had not heard that story because
so
we've heard about Harry.
Right. Well, that's East Tennessee. Yeah. But there are literally hundreds of stories. There was one representative that got the word that his child was dying, and he was a pro-suffrage person, so he was running for a train to try to get home to see his child, and one of the supporters of suffrage got him to come off of the train and go stay for the vote, because we needed every vote we could get, and then arranged a special train for him immediately after the vote to get back to see his child. And he got back, and his child was better at that point. There are all Theta Sims in the federal vote to get it out of the House of Representatives in Congress, had originally been anti-suffrage. He switched and sponsored the bill in 1918 and in 1919. And when one of the critical votes in the House was about ready to take place, he fell and broke his shoulder.
Oh, my goodness.
And refused to get it set. He went on
because he wanted to go back to vote.
He wanted to try to influence other Southern legislators to vote for suffrage. So, there are just really a lot of stories. Some good and some not so good. We do the Showdown in Knoxville story. That's a really good one. That's when things got kind of hot here in Knoxville, and we had an armed confrontation.
Well, we want to say thank you again, and thank you, DTV viewers. We hope that you have learned something today, and we've stimulated your interest and get involved with the suffrage movement. It's going to be 100 years old. How often can you say, I'm involved with something that's as important as having this right to vote? For women and men too. They know how important it is to have the women out there working and helping and making things happen. And it was not an easy route. As you said, it took 72 years, wasn't it?
72 years.
72 years. So don't let them down. And be sure and tune in on Friday nights at 7:30 here on DTV, or look for us on the YouTube station. Thank you.
Thank you.